Lights flashed, sirens chirped, and before the engine even cooled in her own driveway, a stinging blow struck her face. The officer thought he was putting a trespasser in her place. He didn't know he had just assaulted the one woman possessing the supreme authority to dismantle his entire precinct. The wrought-iron gates of Hawthorne Heights offered a quiet, insulated kind of luxury. It was the sort of affluent suburban neighborhood where the streetlights glowed with a soft, gas lamp warmth, and the lawns were manicured to absolute perfection. It was a place where trouble rarely ventured, and when it did, it was usually handled with hushed conversations behind heavy oak doors. At 11:45 p.m. on a biting November Tuesday, Josephine Montgomery just wanted to go to sleep. She pulled her sleek, obsidian-black Audi A8 into the wide, paved driveway of her 5-bedroom colonial home. Josephine was 48 years old, a woman whose sharp, intelligent eyes were currently clouded by the sheer exhaustion of a 14-hour day. She had just flown in from Washington, D.C., and she was dressed for comfort, wearing a faded gray university hoodie, loose sweatpants, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. After 3 days of high-stakes, closed-door meetings that would dictate the future of federal law enforcement, the only thing she cared about right now was a hot shower and her memory foam mattress. She cut the engine. The silence of the neighborhood wrapped around her like a blanket. She reached over to the passenger seat to grab her leather tote bag, her fingers brushing against the heavy, embossed metal badge resting deep inside it. Before her hand could close around the straps, the blinding glare of a police spotlight flooded her rearview mirror, instantly turning the interior of her car into a stark, glaring white box. A sharp whoop-whoop of a police siren pierced the quiet night. Red and blue lights danced wildly across the brick facade of her home. Josephine sighed, dropping her forehead against the leather steering wheel for a fraction of a second. She didn't panic. She knew she wasn't speeding. Her tags were up to date, and she was literally parked on her own property. Assuming it was a private security patrol or a confused local unit, she pushed open the driver's side door and stepped out into the freezing autumn air. "Stay in the vehicle. I said stay in the vehicle. Keep your hands where I can see them." The voice that barked the order was aggressively loud, echoing off the quiet houses. Advancing up her driveway was Officer Mitchell Harrison, a 12-year veteran of the local municipal force. Harrison was a thick-necked, broad-shouldered man whose uniform always seemed a size too tight, reflecting a career built more on intimidation than actual police work. Trailing half a step behind him, looking decidedly nervous, was his rookie partner, Officer Liam Dempsey. Josephine stood her ground, resting one hand casually on the open door of her Audi. "Officer, is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm, modulated, and entirely devoid of the fear Harrison was accustomed to inspiring. "I gave you a direct order to stay in the vehicle," Harrison snapped, stopping a few feet away, his hand resting menacingly on the butt of his service weapon. He shined a heavy tactical flashlight directly into her eyes. Josephine narrowed her eyes against the glare. "And I stepped out before you issued that order. Now, if you could lower the flashlight, I'd appreciate it. You're parked on my property." Harrison let out a short, cynical bark of a laugh. He looked her up and down. The faded hoodie, the sweatpants, the dark skin that in his prejudiced, narrow mind didn't compute with the multi-million-dollar real estate surrounding them. "Your property?" "Right. And I'm the King of England. Let's see some ID now." "I am standing in my own driveway," Josephine stated, her tone dropping an octave, slipping into the authoritative cadence she usually reserved for uncooperative witnesses. "I haven't committed a traffic violation. I haven't broken a law. Or, what is your reasonable, articulable suspicion for this stop, officer?" The legal terminology flowing so effortlessly from her lips made Harrison bristle. He hated barracks lawyers, citizens who thought they knew the law. He stepped directly into her personal space, the smell of stale coffee and peppermint gum radiating from his breath. "My suspicion is that we've had a string of high-end vehicle thefts in this area, and I see someone who doesn't look like they belong here driving a $100,000 car. Now you're going to hand over your ID, or I'm going to put you in handcuffs for failure to comply." Behind him, Rookie Dempsey shifted uncomfortably. "Sarge," Liam whispered. The plates came back clean. "Registered to a federal blind trust. Let's just—" "Shut up, Dempsey," Harrison hissed without breaking eye contact with Josephine. "I'm handling this." Josephine's patience, already paper-thin from her grueling flight, finally snapped. She knew exactly what this was. She had spent a lifetime fighting it. "My identification is in my bag, on the passenger seat," she said, her voice turning into ice. "I am going to reach in and get it. I suggest you take your hand off your weapon while I do." "Don't you tell me what to do." Josephine turned her back to him, reaching into the car. It was a completely normal, unthreatening movement, but to a man looking for a reason to exert absolute dominance, it was all the excuse he needed. "I said freeze!" Harrison roared. He lunged forward. His heavy hand clamped down on Josephine's left shoulder, yanking her violently backward. The sudden force spun her around, her sneakers skidding on the concrete driveway. Before she could process the physical assault, Harrison's right hand whipped across her face. Smack! The sound of the open-handed slap cracked through the freezing air like a gunshot. The force of it knocked Josephine off balance, her head slamming hard against the roof pillar of her own car. She crumpled to the cold concrete, a sharp, ringing pain exploding in her left ear. The metallic taste of blood instantly flooded her mouth, where her teeth had cut into the inside of her cheek. "Sarge, Jesus!" Liam Dempsey shouted, stepping forward in sheer horror, his hands raised. "What are you doing?" "She was reaching!" Harrison yelled, adrenaline and unwarranted rage coursing through him. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt, aggressively dragging Josephine up by her arm, twisting it painfully behind her back. "She was reaching for a weapon. You saw it, Dempsey." Josephine didn't scream. She didn't cry. As the cold steel ratchets clicked tightly around her wrists, biting into her skin, an eerie, terrifying silence fell over her. She tasted the blood in her mouth. She felt the throbbing heat on her cheek. Harrison shoved her against the trunk of the Audi to pat her down. "Thought you were smart, didn't you?" he sneered into her ear. "Thought you could talk your way out of it." Josephine slowly turned her head. Her eyes, cold and dark as the midnight sky, locked onto Harrison's face. The rookie, Dempsey, caught that look and felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down his spine. It wasn't the look of a frightened civilian. It wasn't the look of an angry criminal. It was the look of a predator who had just memorized the face of its prey. "Officer," Josephine whispered, her voice chillingly soft and devoid of any tremor. "You have just made the most catastrophic mistake of your miserable life." The back of the police cruiser smelled of stale sweat, cheap institutional cleaner, and regret. The hard plastic seats offered no comfort as the car tore through the dark suburban streets, heading toward the 12th District Precinct. In the front seat, Officer Mitchell Harrison was riding an adrenaline high, loudly justifying his actions to his increasingly silent partner. "You gotta show them who runs the streets right out of the gate, Liam," Harrison boasted, aggressively tapping the steering wheel to the rhythm of the sirens. "These people, they get their hands on a little bit of money. They move out to the suburbs, and they think they're untouchable." She was combative. She reached into the vehicle after being told to freeze. It's a textbook righteous strike to maintain control. Liam Dempsey stared out the passenger window, his stomach twisting into painful knots. "I was 24 years old, only 6 months out of the academy." He knew the protocol. He knew the law. He knew, with terrifying certainty, that what he had just witnessed was a gross violation of civil rights, an unprovoked assault on an unarmed civilian. "She didn't have a weapon, Mitch," Liam said quietly, his voice tight. "Her bag was unzipped. I saw her wallet right on top." "She could have had a weapon," Harrison snapped back, his tone brooking no argument. "You write your report exactly how I tell you to write it, rookie, unless you want your career to end before you even get your 2-year pin." In the back seat, Josephine Montgomery remained completely motionless. She didn't lean against the cage. She didn't complain about the handcuffs, cutting off the circulation to her hands. She simply sat, her posture impeccably straight despite the restraints, watching the streetlights pass by. She was calculating. Every word Harrison said, every threat he made to his partner, was being recorded in the steel trap of her mind. She memorized the badge number pinned to Harrison's chest. She felt the swelling on her cheek, a pulsating reminder of the systemic rot she had spent the last 20 years of her life fighting. She hadn't revealed her identity in the driveway, because the moment he laid hands on her, it stopped being a simple traffic stop and became a federal crime. If she had screamed her title, he might have panicked, backed off, and covered his tracks. No, Josephine wanted him to dig his grave as deep as he possibly could. She was going to let him pour the concrete over his own career. The cruiser pulled into the back lot of the 12th District Precinct. The building was an old, brutalist concrete structure, worn down by decades of handling the city's overflow. Harrison threw the car into park, stepped out, and yanked the back door open. "Out!" he barked, grabbing her arm and hauling her to her feet. He marched her through the heavy metal back doors, down a hallway lined with scuffed linoleum, and into the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights of the booking room. The precinct was relatively quiet for a Tuesday night. A few officers were typing at their desks. A couple of sex workers were sitting on a wooden bench, looking bored. Behind the raised booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Frank Hodges, a balding man who looked like he was counting the seconds until his retirement. "What do we got, Mitch?" Hodges asked, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Suspect apprehended at Hawthorne Heights. Suspected burglary, resisting arrest, failure to comply, and assaulting an officer," Harrison rattled off, slamming Josephine's leather tote bag onto the high counter. He had grabbed it from the Audi before leaving. Hodges finally looked up. He took in Josephine's bruised face, her faded hoodie, and the handcuffs. "Assaulting an officer. She looks like she took a pretty good hit." "She slipped and hit her head against the car, while resisting," Harrison lied smoothly, shooting a warning glance at Liam, who was staring at his boots. "Combative all the way. Process her. I'm gonna go type up the preliminary." Hodges sighed, pulling a plastic bin forward. "All right, lady. Name?" Josephine stared at the desk sergeant. "I want my phone call." "You'll get your phone call after booking." "Name?" "By law, I am entitled to my phone call." "Now," Josephine said, her voice echoing slightly in the large, hollow room. The absolute authority in her tone made two officers at nearby desks pause their typing. It wasn't the usual panicked demand of an arrestee. It sounded like an order from a commanding officer. Hodges frowned, clearly unnerved. He looked at Harrison, who was pouring a cup of coffee across the room. "Just let her make the damn call so she shuts up," Harrison yelled over. Hodges pushed a heavy black landline phone across the counter. "Make it quick. Local calls only." "I need to use my own phone," Josephine replied coldly. "The number I need to call is heavily encrypted and won't accept an incoming connection from an unverified public line. My phone is in the front pocket of my bag." Hodges rolled his eyes, reached into the leather tote, and pulled out her smartphone. He didn't bother digging deeper into the bag. If he had just moved his hand 2 inches to the left, he would have felt the solid gold badge of the United States Department of Justice and the embossed leather credential wallet, identifying the bearer as the newly confirmed Inspector General of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Internal Affairs Division. But Hodges didn't look. He handed her the phone. With her hands cuffed in front of her, Josephine awkwardly dialed a 12-digit sequence, bypassing her own contacts list to access a secure, direct line. It rang twice. "Lawson!" A sharp, awake voice answered. It was Bradley Lawson, the Deputy Director of Operations. "Brad, it's Joe," Josephine said, keeping her voice low but perfectly clear. "Joe? I thought your flight landed an hour ago. You should be in bed. What's going on?" "I've been delayed. I am currently standing in the booking room of the 12th District Municipal Precinct." There was a 5-second pause on the line. When Lawson spoke again, the casual tone was entirely gone. It was replaced by the razor-sharp intensity of a federal operative. "Are you injured?" "Minor blunt force trauma to the left side of my face. Handcuffed. The arresting officer is a Mitchell Harrison." She heard a chair scrape violently across the floor on the other end of the line. "Harrison," Lawson repeated, the sound of furious typing echoing in the background. "I have him. Excessive force complaints, 2 settled civil suits, a history of racial profiling." "How did he—" "Never mind." "Do they know who you are?" "No," Josephine replied, staring directly across the room at Harrison, who was laughing at a joke one of his buddies just made. "They haven't bothered to look in my bag. They charged me with resisting arrest and suspected burglary on my own property." "Mother of God," Lawson whispered. It wasn't a prayer. It was a realization of the absolute hellfire that was about to rain down on the local police department. "Joe, what are your orders?" "Wake up the local field office director. Assemble the DOJ Rapid Response Tactical Team. I want the federal mandates and the civil rights violation indictments drafted immediately. Call the municipal police commissioner and the mayor. Wake them up and tell them to meet you at the 12th district in exactly 20 minutes. Done. We are wheels up in 2 minutes. Do you want me to call the precinct captain and tell him to release you?" "No," Josephine said, her eyes narrowing as she watched Harrison swaggering back toward the booking desk. "Do not call the precinct. I want them caught completely blind. Let them proceed exactly as they are. I'll wait for you." "Understood. Sit tight, boss. We're coming." Josephine dropped the phone onto the counter. Harrison stepped up beside her, sipping his coffee, a smug, untouchable grin plastered on his face. "Who'd you call? Your public defender? Tell him to bring a toothbrush, honey, because you're not getting bail on an assault charge until Thursday." Josephine turned her head slowly, looking at Harrison with a terrifying, serene calmness. The blood had dried on her lip, but the bruise on her cheek was already blooming into a dark, angry purple. "I called my associate," Josephine said softly. "He's coming to clear up this misunderstanding." Harrison laughed aloud. "Oh, I bet he is. Can't wait to meet him." Josephine smiled, a cold, empty expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I imagine you will." Outside the precinct, the quiet night remained undisturbed. But 3 miles away, the deafening roar of armored federal SUVs was already tearing out of an underground garage, bringing an ungodly storm directly to Officer Harrison's front door. The fluorescent lights of the 12th District booking room hummed with a low, agonizing electrical buzz. Desk Sergeant Frank Hodges grabbed a heavy plastic inventory bin and slid it roughly across the scarred wooden counter. He picked up Josephine Montgomery's expensive leather tote bag, unceremoniously holding it upside down. The contents tumbled out, cascading into the bin with a chaotic clatter. Keys, a designer wallet, a slim laptop, an assortment of pens, and a heavy rectangular black leather wallet hit the bottom of the tray. Officer Mitchell Harrison leaned heavily against the desk, a smirk playing across his lips as he casually drank his lukewarm coffee. "Inventory it all, Frank. Make sure you document the laptop. Probably stolen out of one of those houses she was casing." Rookie Liam Dempsey stood a few feet away, shifting his weight from foot to foot. His face was pale, his stomach churning with an undeniable, nauseating dread. He knew what he had seen. He had watched a seasoned veteran violently assault a compliant woman. He opened his mouth to speak, to stop this madness, but the words died in his throat when Harrison shot him a venomous, silencing glare. Hodges picked up the black leather wallet. It was heavier than a standard civilian billfold. He flipped it open to log the identification cards. The desk sergeant stopped breathing. His eyes widened, locking on to the heavy, solid gold shield embedded in the fine leather. Above the shield, an embossed identification card bore the unmistakable seal of the United States Department of Justice. The text was stark, authoritative, and utterly terrifying. It read, "Josephine Montgomery, Inspector General, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Internal Affairs Division." Above the title was a direct authorization signature from Attorney General Merrick Garland. Hodges felt the blood drain from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ash-gray hue. His hands began to tremble so violently that the badge rattled softly against the plastic bin. He slowly lifted his eyes, looking past the handcuffs, past the faded university hoodie, and stared at the bruised face of the woman standing before him. "Mitch," Hodges whispered, his voice cracking, entirely devoid of moisture. "Mitch, look at this." Harrison rolled his eyes, setting his coffee cup down with an annoyed sigh. "What is it, Frank?" "She got a fake ID in there. Add forgery to the charges." He leaned over the counter, peering into the bin. Harrison squinted at the gold shield. He read the words. He read them a second time. The smirk on his face slowly melted away, replaced by a profound, agonizing confusion. "It's a prop," Harrison muttered, though his voice lacked its previous arrogant conviction. "It has to be a prop. People buy this garbage on the internet all the time. She's impersonating a federal officer. That's a felony." Josephine stood perfectly still, her hands securely fastened behind her back. She did not make eye contact with Harrison. "Officer Harrison," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm, resonant register. "I strongly suggest you read the serial number on that badge and run it through your terminal. Because in exactly 3 minutes, the people who issued it to me are going to walk through those doors, and they will not be nearly as polite as I have been." Harrison swallowed hard. A bead of cold sweat formed at his temple, sliding down his cheek. He looked at Dempsey, who was now staring at the badge in absolute, unadulterated horror. "Run it, Frank," Harrison ordered, his voice suddenly frantic. "Run the damn name, right now!" Hodges frantically typed the name and serial number into the National Federal Database. The system loaded for 3 agonizing seconds. Then the computer screen flashed red. An overriding top-tier clearance profile populated the screen, displaying a high-resolution photograph of Josephine Montgomery in full federal dress uniform. The warning text below her profile indicated that she held a Level 8 Alpha security clearance and reported directly to the Attorney General of the United States. "Oh my God," Hodges choked out, stumbling backward and knocking his rolling chair into a filing cabinet. "Oh dear God. Mitch, it's real. She's the Inspector General. She investigates federal corruption. She has the authority to dismantle this entire department." Harrison's heart slammed against his ribs like a trapped bird. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. He had illegally detained, verbally abused, and physically battered one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the country. He had assaulted the exact person whose sole professional purpose was to eradicate dirty cops. Before Harrison could even process the magnitude of his catastrophic blunder, the quiet night outside the precinct was shattered. The deafening roar of high-performance engines echoed through the brick walls. The screeching of heavy tires tearing into the back parking lot filled the air. Red and blue strobe lights, infinitely brighter and more aggressive than municipal police cruisers, pierced through the frosted windows of the booking room. The heavy reinforced metal doors of the precinct did not simply open. They were violently thrown open, slamming against the concrete walls with a thunderous crash. A wave of heavily armed, tactical federal agents poured into the room. They wore black combat gear, Kevlar vests emblazoned with FBI, DOJ Task Force in stark yellow lettering, and carried suppressed submachine guns. They moved with absolute, terrifying precision, instantly securing every exit, locking down the terminal stations, and shouting coordinated commands that completely overwhelmed the local officers. "Nobody move! Hands off your keyboards! Step away from the desks!" a tactical commander roared, his weapon trained securely on the floor, but ready for immediate elevation. The municipal officers, including Hodges, threw their hands into the air, paralyzed by shock. Behind the tactical unit, an armada of black SUVs had effectively blockaded the entire street. Through the wall of armed federal agents walked Bradley Lawson, Deputy Director of Operations for the Department of Justice. He was a tall, imposing man in a sharp navy suit, his face set in a furious, unforgiving scowl. Flanking were 2 individuals looking remarkably terrified. The city's mayor, William Peterson, wearing pajamas beneath a hastily thrown-on trench coat, and the local police commissioner, sweating profusely despite the freezing November temperatures. Lawson ignored the politicians entirely. His eyes scanned the room, instantly locking onto Josephine Montgomery, standing by the booking desk, her hands restrained, a dark purple contusion swelling the entire left side of her face. Lawson's jaw clenched. The fury radiating from him was palpable. He marched straight toward her, closing the distance in 5 long strides. "Key," Lawson demanded, extending his hand toward Hodges without looking at him. Hodges, trembling uncontrollably, fumbled the handcuff key from his belt and dropped it into Lawson's palm. Lawson moved behind Josephine, swiftly unlocking the restraints. The heavy steel cuffs hit the floor with a loud metallic clank that echoed through the dead silence of the room. Josephine rubbed her raw wrists, stepping away from the desk. "Inspector General Montgomery," Lawson said, his voice loud enough for every single person in the precinct to hear. "Are you requiring immediate medical evacuation?" "No, Brad," Josephine replied smoothly, rolling her shoulders. "I am perfectly fine. I just had a rather disappointing encounter with local law enforcement." Mayor Peterson stepped forward, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Inspector General, Words cannot express the absolute outrage. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding. The city will take full responsibility." "Save it, Mayor," Josephine cut him off coldly. "Your apologies are irrelevant. The systemic rot in your police department is no longer a local issue. It is now a federal investigation." She turned slowly, her dark, piercing eyes locking onto Officer Mitchell Harrison. Harrison was hyperventilating. His chest heaved as he backed away, his legs shaking violently. The tough, untouchable predator who had swaggered through the streets for 12 years was gone, replaced by a broken, terrified man realizing his life was over. "Officer Harrison," Josephine said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward him. "You informed me that I was a criminal. You assumed, based purely on your own prejudice, that I did not belong in my own home. And when I complied with your orders, you struck me in the face." Harrison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His vocal cords were completely paralyzed by fear. He looked at the heavily armed FBI agents surrounding him, then at his own police commissioner, who was refusing to even make eye contact with him. "You see, Mitchell," Josephine continued, her tone conversational but lethal, "when you wield a badge as a weapon of intimidation, you eventually strike someone holding a bigger shield. You are charged with aggravated assault on a federal officer, civil rights violations under the color of law, false imprisonment, and official misconduct." Harrison's knees buckled. The sheer weight of the federal charges, carrying decades of mandatory prison time, crashed down upon him. He gasped for air, his vision tunneling. Without a single word of defense, Mitchell Harrison collapsed entirely, fainting dead away and hitting the linoleum floor with a heavy, pathetic thud. Nobody rushed to help him. Josephine stared down at the unconscious officer with total disgust. She then shifted her gaze to the rookie, Liam Dempsey, who was standing frozen against the far wall, tears of sheer panic welling in his eyes. "Officer Dempsey," Josephine called out softly. Liam jumped, standing at rigid attention. "Yes, ma'am," he choked out. "You did not strike me. You attempted to de-escalate. You noted that I was unarmed. Your internal compass works, but your courage is lacking," Josephine stated, analyzing him with calculating precision. "You are going to testify against him in federal court. You will detail every single excessive force incident he has ever bragged about. If you do this, you keep your badge. If you lie, you share a cell with him. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am. I swear it, ma'am," Liam sobbed, nodding frantically. Josephine turned back to Law. "Take Harrison to holding. Have the FBI seize all precinct records, body camera footage, and internal communications from the last 5 years. Nobody goes home until we finish." She picked up her bag, sliding her gold shield back into the pocket. She wiped a single drop of dried blood from her lip, her posture perfect, her authority absolute. The corrupt kingdom Mitchell Harrison had built was gone, completely eradicated by a single slap in a quiet, suburban driveway. Justice had not just been served, it had arrived with an army. Did this intense story of justice and accountability keep you on the edge of your seat? Sometimes, the most powerful people hide in plain sight, and arrogance is always the ultimate downfall. If you enjoyed this dramatic real-life twist, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends to spread the message, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Josephine's ultimate revenge. See you next time.